I guess I'm a little partial to Kiowa County since I grew up there, but Bill has lots of family from some of the early people that settled in Kiowa County, and so he's going to be talking about some of those. I don't know if anybody here, does anybody here remember Gillette Fluke, longtime cowboy from Kiowa County, and eventually moved to Lamar. And C.D. Mills did a number of stories of him in the newspaper. I don't know if anybody remembers him, but Gillette Fluke was one of Bill's grandfather's friends, cowboy friends. And so Bill's also going to be talking about a pistol that his grandfather found on Sanford. So I guess we're ready for you, Bill.
Just thinking, when I was over here, I've had that pistol. I inherited it. I've always had it, and I kept it safe. It's part of our family. And I had a brother and then a sister, but I ended up inheriting the pistol. And it's now, I think time goes by, and you get old, like I'm 75, and you wonder, one day at a time, you don't know, I realize at my age that any little thing could end it for me. I could stub my toe and break it. I'd be a cripple. But I'm lucky to be able to come down here and have people like you that would be interested in this pistol and the history behind it. And you just assume your relatives are your relatives, but as I get older, I realize they were special people and wonderful people. And my grandmother was a college graduate. She came out with her brother and a friend of his, and they homesteaded, some land out here. Who would homestead out here? You people probably look back at your relatives, and they had to be, I don't know what it was. I thought, well, why did they stop here? On that prairie. But they did. And they survived and made it work. And it's like he was talking about Gillette Fluke. He was my granddad's old sidekick. They were young people together. And I came out here one time with my uncle who lived in Florida, and we drove out here. And I sat down and talked to Gillette. And he told me a story about his life when he came here. And his father came out here and built a house outside of Sheridan Lake there. And then he went back and got the family. And they came out with their cattle and everything else. And so, I don't know, Fluke must have been 12, 13 years old, I don't know, but his dad said, hey, you take the cattle and go south. On the prairie. Go south. And he said, you'll come to a lake. He said, when you get to the lake, you wait for us. And they came along with their wagon full of all their worldly goods. And so anyway, he gets to the lake out there, which was Sheridan Lake. He looks up on a little rise, and he sees somebody up there. And he told me, thought maybe it was an Indian. Thought maybe I'd ride up there and see what one looked like. So he rode up there, and there's an old cowboy. And the cowboy was an entrepreneur. He and his buddy had come out there, they're going to start a restaurant. All the homesteaders stopped at that lake, and they thought, well, we can do some business here. And his partner was in town buying goods. And so Gillette said, well, is there anything I can buy? And he said he got a bag of ginger snaps. And they had ginger snaps came in a wooden box, a wooden crate. So he said he got this, and he said he had the bag of ginger snaps was so big he couldn't even get on his horse. He crawled up on his horse, and the guy handed him the ginger snaps. And so he finally got tired of waiting at the lake, took off again, and finally found the house. But he was telling his dad, he says, when I'm going across here, he said, I saw bigger lakes. And his dad explained to him that he was seeing mirages. I don't know if any of you have you seen mirages out on the prairies? Quite an excitement, I would believe. But then I had an uncle, his name was Kiowa Albright, Uncle Kai, and he was the first white person born in Kiowa County up there. And of course, there were probably people moving through that had kids, but he was the only resident out there. And, but anyway, my granddad had an old buddy, and his name was Gillette Fluke. Did anybody here know him? Did you?
I knew he was.
Huh?
I knew he was.
Yeah, he was an old, one of the, oh, he did? Yeah, he lived, he had a ranch out in Chivington. And he retired here in Lamar. And at the time, he told me that and I don't know people here if you have more interest in this sort of thing, but he said that the newspaper here was sending somebody out and he was telling them the stories that he had encountered, when he was young. And, but anyway, this story he tells about when he came out here was just amazing to me. He said he got to the lake and he sees somebody up there and he thinks it's an Indian. He thought he's just right up there and see what one looked like. And so eventually he got tired of waiting there and took off again and found their house. But those people were, I don't know if I would survive anything like that. I don't know. My grandmother, like I said, she was a college graduate and everything else, and her brother went to Cripple Creek. And he was one of the early pioneers up there. And my cousins inherited his property up there. They had a real nice Victorian home up there. And then they said that her brother also owned the bank building. And so they donated the bank building as a historic building to the town. And so it's interesting to look back and see those kinds of things. And Martin is my cousin. And I would have to say that, and he told me today, what was the lady's name that helped put that Kiowa
Roletta
County?
Teal for Leeds.
Pardon?
Roletta Teal for Leeds.
Uh-huh.
And Mrs. Jacobs.
Anyway, they worked, and that's, the government, I understand, this is a story I have, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the government offered money to gather up this information, historical information about these counties. And that lady and my cousin there, and without them, we wouldn't have that record. And I mean, they have pictures of all the old timers, and like I say, with this, I think it's priceless. And I think it's probably, there's probably, like my friend Kurt here is a historian, and he just loves history, and he studies it. And he's one that looks for the truth. Some people want a color of it. Kurt is one that really looks for the truth. And so those people like that's going to preserve this for all of us. And evidently, somebody told me a while back that this book on Kiowa County, you can get it through, what's that mailing service, Kurt?
Amazon.com.
Amazon.com.
You could also probably find a couple copies in the bookstore somewhere near here.
Yeah. Well, that's probably true. And, to me, it's a rare thing that a book like that exists, and it's a beautiful book. Have you seen the hard copy and photographs?
Both kinds, both the hardcover and the paperback. They're high quality book. It's very good.
And that's just, I'd say, these people that want to preserve that for us is, how do you reward them other than be glad we have something like that? And in fact, it was interesting because you see these whole family stories, and some of them you won't be proud of. But my Uncle Kai, like I say, he was supposedly the first white person born in Kiowa County. But anyway, my granddad was in a pool hall, and some guy was picking on my Uncle Kai. My granddad, there was a shotgun leaning up against the wall. Granddad pulled that shotgun up, pulled the triggers, and happened that the gun was empty. So he didn't kill anybody that day. And they knew a lot of people. I think Kurt and I were talking about that Roy Best. He used to be a warden at the prison. He and my granddad were friends. And, and another thing too that was interesting interesting is my Uncle Kai, I guess he was unmarried. And they said he used to travel around the countryside and visit people. And what he would do is he'd show up at mealtime. And but when some lady, what was her name, Martin, that bought the land and wanted to buy the
The
land?
bullwares, Sheri Lake.
Yeah.
The old bullware.
Anyway, they heard that he was single and he was honest and he knew everybody. So she asked him to go around and buy up land for her. And so he wandered around and bought up land for her. Yes. So he had he had the knowledge and she had the money. Yes, put it that way. But those are interesting stories, and I think to a lot of people, I think to our children and our relatives, it's nice to preserve that. And it's wonderful for me to see people that want to do that. And I just always kind of like that sort of thing. And I was just lucky and fortunate. Do I have to quit?
No, what about just?
Oh, yeah, my pistol. Thank you. I babble. I'm not a speaker, so I just start babbling on. Like I'm talking to my next door neighbor or something. But anyway, this is the pistol. And this was found at the Chivington. Well, it's different things. My grandmother called it a massacre. And but there's other ideas about that today. And Kurt is real knowledgeable about historically, and his friends are too. But anyway, this is the pistol that he found, and it's an old Star. And I've had it, and it got rusted because of laying out there. Dug it up, but went to school at DU, and Kurt found there was a Dr. Carey there that was the head of the history department, was he?
Chairman of the history department from 1950 to 1971.
Yeah, and I was a barber, and so I worked there right across from DU, and I knew him. Really a nice fellow. But caliber was a pistol. The caliber. What would you think, Kurt?
I'd say 45.
45.
It was big. It's got a big bore.
I think it's safe. It does have, you never know that powder, you know, they claim it crystallizes, the old powder does. So I wouldn't want to drop it. I'd duck if I did. But there is some percussion caps, one or two in this, so I don't know. Well, I can tell you what, my Uncle Kai, you know, being a spoiled kid, you can see where he hammered on this, the hammer, to try to fire it. It didn't fire, so.
Sounded a little more micro.
But I'll pass this around and you guys can look at it. And I'm sure it's safe. It was that Chivington. You know, they call it, like I say, and Kurt knows a lot more about it, but they call it a massacre, but it wasn't. It was a full-fledged battle.
Another thing interesting about this, Bill's grandfather's friend, who we've been talking about, Gillette Fluke, documented. I don't know if he was actually with your grandfather. Was he when he found it?
Yeah, he wasn't with him, but they were working for the Double S Ranch, which was a ranch that originally was owned by an Englishman, and then an American guy bought it, and the Englishman had neglected it. And these cattle had drifted clear up into Kansas and Oklahoma. So that's what the Double S, when they bought it, they started rounding them up, bringing them back to Colorado. And they did that for 2 years.
The Gillette Road that was found 10 miles north of Chivington and upstream from where the monument is out there, which is the exact same place where we found all of our artifacts.
That's an important thing because the location of that, all artifacts he found, it proves it. You know, there are other organizations that want to locate it someplace else, but it didn't prove it.
Okay, anybody else have any questions for Bill? All right, thanks a lot, Bill.